Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Modern Open in Syracuse, part of the SCG Tour brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller alongside Team Lotus Box's own Mullen. How you doing?
Great. I'm glad to be here.
Your player's been grinding the SCG Tour here for a little while and making a name for yourself, having a couple of top 8s, invitational top 8. Attach yourself to this team now, and you're doing pretty well for yourself.
I've been having some success lately, and I was able to team up with Lotus Box, and ever since we started that team at the previous Invitational, our team has been doing pretty consistently very well. We've got a good testing process going on, and very excited to continue playing in the Star City Games tour.
Yeah, we see the jerseys all around, and usually one in the top 8 here and there. So you guys are doing pretty well.
Yeah,
and
it's been good.
You're playing a Scapeshift deck, but you have a notable inclusion because a lot of people are asking us, is Hour of Promise going to make an impact in Modern? I think it has, and you have a build that is very interesting. I want you to talk about how you came to your build, then we'll go over the card specifics.
For sure, yeah. So I was playing a lot of just kind of the traditional Titan Shift deck, kind of leading up to this tournament. I wanted to practice something for this Modern tournament in Syracuse, and I was playing the traditional Titan Shift deck, which was running 4 Scape Shifts, 4 Titans, 2 Summoner's Pacts as kind of its payoff package. And then the other interesting thing about it is that it was running a lot of main deck interaction pieces. Some people were going as far as running Engineered Explosives in the main, and Relics in the main, and Lightning Bolts in the main. And I think that was probably good for a while, but I think that people have yet to realize that we can kind of take the deck in a different direction and be more proactive ourselves.
Sure.
And I think that Hour Promise is the card that lets us do that. Hour Promise is essentially a 5-mana Primeval Titan trigger. And the importance of that is that you can cast it pretty consistently on turn 3 if you have a Search for Tomorrow on turn 1. So you can search for tomorrow, suspend on turn 1, turn 2 cast any of your 2-mana ramp spells, and then turn 3 you're casting your Hour of Promise. And Hour of Promise finds the marquee card of the deck, Valakut.
Sure.
So all of a sudden on turn 3 you've got 7 lands in play with 2 Valakuts and hopefully 5 mountains already. So from then on out, all of your land drops and all of your ramp spells turn into 6 damage.
Right.
So that's just a very powerful kind of curve that you can have that Hour provides.
Right, and that ramps, pattern that you explain sounds kind of out there when you think about the old Scapeshift decks with all the interaction and stuff.
Right.
But the way you have the deck configured now, it is all just condensed into these ramp spells, so that you're doing what you just described consistently on turn 3 and then 4.
And I kind of just described like the ideal curve, but I mean, as we all know, Magic doesn't always work out perfectly. So one of the upsides of this deck is that you just have so many ways of turning on your Valakuts very early. So the idea of my deck is that I took out all of those interactive pieces that I was talking about earlier, and I just wanted to be all in on ramping into Valakut triggers as fast as I could. So I took out all the bolts and the Engineered Explosives and the Relics from the main, and I still have them in the sideboard, so there are a lot of matchups where they're necessary. But for game 1s, I just want to be having all these ramp spells, and kind of a result of that is that I'm consistently getting out a lot of mana early, and I'm also playing, one of the cards I want to talk a lot about is actually Prismatic Omen.
Sure.
So Prismatic Omen kind of turns your Valakuts on much earlier, and Prismatic Omen combos very well with a lot of the cards in the deck, like Hour Promise in particular. If you have a Prismatic Omen out and then you cast an Hour Promise, you can find 2 Valakuts, and they will count as mountains at that point, and all of a sudden that's 4 Valakut triggers or 12 damage that you're getting just from your Hour Promise.
Right.
And if you happen to have 1 Valakut already in play when you cast your Hour Promise and you have a Prismatic Omen out, then that's 18 damage.
The game's basically over.
Right, it's 18 damage, and that's kind of like the old Scapeshift's deck finishing move is like 7 land Scapeshift, but now we kind of have a Prismatic Omen 5-land Hour of Promise.
Yeah. You have even more ways to kind of assemble this kill. And I like what you're doing because this kind of looks like old Modern where everyone was doing proactive combo decks that were only wanting to do one thing. And now this deck, it's just trying to do one thing.
Like Twin a year or 2 ago was like a big influence on Modern, and when Twin existed, people had to interact, or they were just going to die. So that you had to run your Lightning Bolts or your interactive pieces to not just die to that. But now Modern has moved much more towards like you want to be very proactive and kind of in moving your own game plan as much as you can, and just trying to race your opponent as opposed to like caring about what they do.
So we'll take a look at all the cards here, because you got some interesting cards floating around in here. Now, we've seen different builds of Scape Shift that probably run all of these cards,
Sure.
but rarely all together.
Yes. Yeah,
So-
we're running a lot of ramp spells.
Yeah, we have
can talk about
Explore,
that. Yeah.
Search for Tomorrow, or your turn 1, Accelerants, and then you have Farseek, Colony Heart Expedition. We've got Secure Tribe Elder,
Yep,
and
hello, Steve.
Prismatic Omen, which isn't a ramp spell, but it is
Yeah.
part of your game plan in certain draws.
It isn't a ramp spell, but in a lot of the contexts, it does increase your clock by 1 land drop, because it turns any Valakutes you have into mountains. And a lot of the time, you care less about your actual land count. I mean, your land count matters because you still need the 6 mana to cast your Primeval Titan, or the 5 mana to cast your Hour, but Prismatic Omen kind of like shortens that clock down by 1 on like the key turn that you need, or the key number of lands you need to play. It kind of reduces the number of lands that you need to play in by 1.
Then we move into one that I don't expect to see very often. We've got
Yeah.
Wood Elves
Wood
hanging
Elves.
out in this deck as well, so
course.
your mana creatures are both showing up.
Wood Elves is just a one of. I like Wood Elves a lot because another card that we're playing, the Summoner's Pact. Sometimes there are curves where you want to be able to make your 6th land drop, cast a ramp spell, and then cast Scape Shift for 7 land Scape Shift, which is 18 damage. And Wood Elves kind of is like a utility piece that allows your Summoner's Pact to be one of those ramp spells if you only have 2 green sources in play.
Okay.
The deck is very strange in the context of all of the cards in the main deck are green. I'm not running any main deck red cards, but we have to play a lot of mountains.
Sure.
And we want all of our land drops to be mountains. So sometimes you're a little short on green lands. So a good turn 6 play, or not turn 6, but 6 land play can be packed for Wood Elves, cast Wood Elves, get another green source, cast Scape Shift. So it's just kind of, it gives you access to being able to make that play, whereas you can't cast your you can't like find a Secure Tribe Elder, because that's not going to find you an untapped green source.
Right. Yeah, so this kind of has all of the angles of assembling
Right.
the Scape Shift or the Primeval Titan
Right.
as soon as possible,
Yeah.
and then burning them out from there. And then
Right.
with your Prismatic Omen, you have ways to just burn them out with your
Right.
lands way more consistently.
And I do want to say that a lot of the games actually don't come down to me casting Scape Shift or casting to Primeval Titan. A lot of the games come down to me getting enough lands in play with Valakutes, and then drawing, either playing from my hand or drawing off the top just the ramp spells or the mountains that can all be turned into damage.
With our promise here, I have to ask, were there any ways you were fiddling around with deserts, or was the deserts ever an idea that could work?
I wish that we'd have deserts so we could get some zombie action, but just the way that the Scape Shift mana base is constructed, you need your green sources and you need mountains, and everything has to specifically be a mountain. So if they ever printed like a mountain desert,
Sure.
we could put it in there, and I would immediately put it in there. But
Maybe 10 years from now, we'll be
we'll
having
get a
desert
mountain
mountains.
Yeah. But there's just not enough room for non-mountain, non-green source, or just non-mountain lands.
Sure.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned earlier, all your red cards are in the sideboard. So we've got
Yeah.
your Angers and your Lightning Bolts,
Yeah.
your Shadow Storm, all in there, hanging
Yeah.
out. Then we have the green cards, which we can talk about here, because I think we all know where the Bolts and the Angers and stuff like that's going to come
for
into
sure.
play. You have your Engineered Explosives, your Relics,
Yep.
2 Obstinate Baloth, the Chameleon Clauses, and then can't think of the name offhand, Reclamation Sage.
Yeah, Reclamation Sage. Yeah, they're just kind of some cards that are very good post-board when you know the matchup that you're in and you need a certain kind of effect. Reclamation Sage kind of gets rid of things like Ruined Halo is something that I've seen pop up lately that can name Valakut and turn off a lot of your strategy. It hits Ley Line of Sanctity, and it just kind of hits a lot of artifacts that might be floating around.
Sure.
And then you've got your Obstinate Baloths for the kind of aggro matchups. You bring it in against Burn, which is great. You kind of like need that extra turn that it buys you to be able to kill them with your spells. And then Chameleon Colossus is kind of the bullet against Death Shadow. Death Shadow.
Yeah.
That's like the one deck that everybody's talking about, and it's definitely been on top of Modern for a while. But the one thing about Chameleon Colossus is they can't really ever interact with it. It's protection from black, so protection from Fatal Push and Terminate, and the only thing that can potentially kill it is like Bolt, Snap Bolt if they're running a Bolt, but kind of people have been moving away from that. So it's just a card that you can play against Death Shadow and then it will just win the game for you.
Lastly, you only got a couple of creatures running around in the sideboard. How's this deck prepared against the people who are looking to take out all of one copy of the, take out your win con, so to speak, the decks that try to beat the deck via doing that?
Yeah, I mean, if Valakut gets Ghost Quartered and Surgicaled, that's very bad for me. But I found that that's often a very specific interaction that doesn't happen all the time. And if I know that I'm playing against a deck that's running specifically Ghost Quarter and Surgical Extraction, you can just sandbag the Valakuts in your hand and don't play them out and don't expose them to that. Because with this deck in particular, it's definitely very all-in on the Valakut plan. So if they have a way of getting the Valakuts out of my deck, or making the Valakuts not do what they need to, either by something like Blood Moon or Ruined Halo, is pretty bad for me, and I kind of have to convert to just like a creature beatdown plan. And as you said, there aren't a lot of creatures in the deck. So, but I think that generally in Modern, there aren't a ton of ways of people doing that, and Reclamation Sage can clear up some of those things. So I definitely have ways of interacting with that.
Okay. Lastly, are you happy with the build you've came to here, and are there any cards you're looking to get into the deck that didn't make the cut?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of cards that I wanted to squeeze in, and kind of the downside of having so many ramp spells in the main deck is that, like, if I'm going to go down that path, I'm losing out on a lot of like heavy-hitting sideboard cards in Modern. So I wanted another Obstinate Baloth. I wanted something for control decks like a Thrun or something like that. I wanted a 4th Lightning Bolt specifically for mono-white Death and Taxes that's been popping up. Because your Angers are great against a lot of those white weenie kind of decks, but if they can get down like an early Leonin Arbiter or a Thalia, or both, then your Anger's just never going to be able to do what you want it to. So definitely a lot of cards that I wanted to squeeze in, but I think that because I'm on such an all-in plan of, I'm willing to kind of lose some equity in not having all these bullets in order to make my deck more powerful.
Right. And it seems pretty powerful. You're off to a 4-0 start, so you got to be pretty happy.
Yes. Yeah, and overall I'm very excited about the build, and I'm very happy with the 75 that I came with to this tournament. So looking forward to it.
Hopefully you can have an Hour of Devastation on your opponents via Hour of Promise.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Here in Modern, I'm very happy to see all these new cards, because you're not the only person I've seen show up with some cards from Hour of Devastation. So Collins, thanks for joining me here in the sideboard.
Not a problem.
Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Syracuse.